My name is Elena, 28 years old, and sometimes I feel like I live in two different worlds. One where I'm celebrated, and another where I'm invisible. In Europe, I was a name that echoed in business circles. The ink on the contract was barely dry when the cameras flashed, and I shook hands with a board of men who had underestimated me for months. A $12 million deal, my biggest yet, signed and sealed. They smiled at me as if they had finally seen the genius they had ignored. For once, I wasn't the underestimated girl who should have stayed in school. I wasn't the dropout with big dreams. I was the CEO, the woman who built a tech company from the ashes of rejection and sleepless nights. Standing in that polished glass conference room in Berlin, I felt something I had chased all my life: respect. Not sympathy, not tolerance, not the half-hearted good job people throw your way when they don't mean it. Real respect. The kind that comes only after you've proven everyone wrong. But respect abroad didn't mean respect at home. On the flight back, I imagined the moment of reunion with my family. It's funny, no matter how many times they disappointed me, I still secretly wish they'd surprise me. I pictured my mom's face softening, my dad patting my shoulder, maybe even my sister, Amelia, giving me a small nod of acknowledgement. I thought maybe this time, when I told them about the deal, when I showed them the news articles already circulating about my company, they'd finally look at me and see not the dropout, not the girl who had made unconventional choices, but the woman who had carved her own path. The plane touched down late at night. I was exhausted, but my heart was alive with anticipation. When I drove through the familiar streets, I felt like a child again, coming home after a long school trip, expecting warmth, love, belonging. Instead, what I walked into was silence. The living room lights were on, but dim. My father sat in his chair, eyes glued to the TV, barely looking up when I entered. My mother stood in the kitchen, arms folded, expression unreadable. Amelia wasn't there. The house didn't feel like home. It felt like a place frozen in time, when nothing ever changed. Except me. Where's my car? The question slipped out naturally. I had parked it in their driveway before flying to Europe. My silver car, the one I bought with my first big earnings, wasn't just transportation. It was freedom, a reminder that I didn't need anyone to hand me anything. It wasn't there now. My dad cleared his throat. My mom's lips pressed together. Something twisted in my stomach. We sold it, my mom said flatly, as if she were telling me the weather forecast. I blinked, waiting for the joke to end. Sold it? What do you mean, sold it? Her answer was sharp, cold, dismissive. Amelia needed the money for her business. She deserved it more than you. The words cut deeper than I expected, not just because of the betrayal, but because they were familiar. The same message, wrapped in different forms, had followed me my entire life. You are less. She is more. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard. That jet lag was playing tricks on me. But the look in my mother's eyes, defiant, unapologetic, told me I hadn't. My father avoided my gaze, the way he always did when he knew something was wrong but didn't have the courage to oppose her. I laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that startled even me. You sold my car, for her. My mom tilted her head. She's starting her business, Elena. She needs support. You already have enough. Why can't you understand that? Enough. That word. It slammed into me harder than the loss of the car. What is enough? I had fought for every inch of success. Nights coding until my eyes burned, sleeping on a couch in my office, eating instant noodles while Amelia had her tuition paid, her bills covered, her failures forgiven. And now, after a $12 million deal, after proving myself on an international stage, they still looked at me and decided I had enough. Enough to be robbed, enough to be dismissed, enough to have my efforts turned into handouts for the golden child. That night, in that dimly lit kitchen, two realities collided. The world saw me as a powerhouse, a leader, a woman to be reckoned with. But in my own home, I was still the background character in Amelia's story. I stayed at my parents', my chest rising and falling with quiet fury. They didn't see the storm behind my silence. To them, I was just reacting dramatically to a car. But they didn't understand. It wasn't about the car. It was about everything the car represented. Every memory of being overlooked came rushing back. The time I brought home straight A's and was told, "Good, but Amelia needs help with her science project." The time I landed my first internship, and they said, "Don't brag, your sister hasn't found one yet." The countless birthdays where gifts were practical, functional, while hers were extravagant. I thought I had escaped that pattern. I thought money, success, and independence would free me from being the afterthought. But standing there, I realized the truth. No achievement would ever be enough to earn their equal love. And that was the night I stopped chasing it. Because when my mother said those words, "She deserved it more," I understood something I had been denying for years. I would always live in two realities. The world would celebrate me, while my family diminished me. One reality gave me power. The other stole it away. But I was done letting them. That night, as I stood in the kitchen, listening to Amelia laugh upstairs in her room while I stared at the ghosts of every sacrifice I had made, I made a silent promise. One day soon, they would understand the cost of underestimating me. And it wouldn't be with screams. It wouldn't be with begging. It would be with silence, power, and 6 words that would shatter the illusion they had built. I've heard people say that favoritism is harmless, that parents love all their kids equally, but I've lived long enough to know that's a lie. Love can be equal. Treatment never is. For as long as I can remember, my parents' world revolved around my sister, Amelia. She was the sun in our family, and I was the shadow she cast. When she cried, everyone rushed to comfort her. When I cried, I was told to be strong. When she failed, she was comforted with, "It's okay, everyone makes mistakes." When I failed, I heard, "Why weren't you more careful?" It started small. Birthdays, for instance. On my 12th birthday, I got a set of notebooks and a plain sweater. 2 weeks later, for Amelia's 10th, she got a bicycle with pink streamers, balloons tied to the handles, and a party that filled our backyard with neighbors. I remember standing by the window that day, watching her ride in circles while everyone cheered. My parents never noticed me watching quietly from the corner. Or maybe they did, but chose not to care. By the time we were in high school, the favoritism was no longer subtle. Amelia wanted piano lessons, expensive ones with a private tutor. My parents found the money, cutting into savings, taking on extra hours. I wanted coding classes at a local tech camp, cheaper than half a semester of piano, but I was told, "We can't afford that right now. Just use the school computer lab." Amelia failed math twice, and my parents hired a tutor immediately. When I struggled in chemistry, my mom said, "You'll figure it out, Elena. You always do." That was the thing. They relied on me to be the strong one, the self-sufficient one, their independent child. At first, I wore that label like a badge of honor, but as the years went on, I realized it was just their excuse to neglect me. The final blow came during college. Amelia decided to pursue business, and my parents supported her fully. Textbooks, housing, tuition, all covered. I, on the other hand, had to juggle part-time jobs, student loans, and endless nights of exhaustion just to stay afloat. When I dropped out to build my company, they didn't ask why. They didn't ask if I was okay. My father simply sighed and said, "We knew college wasn't for you anyway." My mother looked at me with disappointment that burned deeper than words. And yet, despite everything, I still kept chasing their approval. Every deal I closed, every milestone I achieved, I hoped it would finally tip the scales. I thought if I earned enough, succeeded enough, made enough noise, they would turn to me and say, "We see you. We're proud of you." But pride, in my family, was a currency spent only on Amelia. So when I walked into that kitchen after my return from Europe and heard the words, "She deserved it more," it wasn't just about the car. It was about every birthday forgotten, every achievement dismissed, every sacrifice I made that went unseen. My car was never just a car, it was the embodiment of my independence. I bought it after years of grinding, after my company turned its first real profit. I still remember the salesman handing me the keys, his smile genuine, his handshake firm. "Congratulations, Ms. Carter," he said, using my name with respect. That moment mattered to me, because it was one of the few times in my life someone looked at me without comparison to Amelia. And now, that symbol was gone. Not because it was stolen by strangers, but because my own parents stripped it from me. They didn't even ask. They didn't even warn me. They simply assumed my sacrifice was expected, because it always had been. I looked at my mother, standing with her arms folded, her chin high, as though daring me to argue. "Amelia needs this," she said. "Why can't you be happy for your sister?" That was the refrain of my life. Be happy for Amelia. When she won, I had to clap the loudest. When she lost, I had to comfort her. When she dreamed, I had to step aside so she could have more room. But what about me? Who had ever been happy for me? My father sat quietly, eyes fixed on his coffee cup, as if avoiding the scene would erase his guilt. He had always been the silent one, never standing up to my mother, never daring to question her favoritism. His silence was complicity, and I knew it. The rage inside me wasn't wild. It was cold, sharp, and controlled. I realized then that the pattern of my life was never going to change. Amelia would always be the center, and I would always be expected to orbit around her. Unless I broke free. That night, something inside me shifted. I stopped longing for their approval. I stopped hoping they'd change. I saw the truth for what it was. My parents had chosen their favorite long ago, and no deal, no success, no achievement would ever rewrite that choice. I thought of all the times I swallowed my anger, all the moments I told myself, they don't mean it that way. They'll see me eventually. But standing there, stripped of yet another piece of my independence, I realized I had been lying to myself. They saw me. They just didn't care. It's strange how clarity feels like both freedom and heartbreak. In that moment, I mourned the parents I never had, the ones who could have celebrated me as fiercely as they celebrated Amelia. But I also felt a strange peace. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you admit the truth, you can stop chasing the impossible. The betrayal over the car was just the latest chapter in a story that had been written long ago. But I decided it would also be the last. Because patterns can be broken. And this time, it would be me doing the breaking. To most people, a car is just metal, wheels, and glass. Replaceable, functional, temporary. But to me, that car was more than transportation. It was the symbol of everything I had fought for. When I bought it, I wasn't thinking about leather seats or horsepower. I wasn't thinking about how sleek it looked gliding down the highway. I was thinking about the nights I had walked home in the rain because I couldn't afford bus fare. I was thinking about the years of coding in a freezing garage, wrapped in blankets, my fingers numb but my will unbroken. I was thinking about the endless rejection emails. Startups fail. Investors aren't interested. You're too young. You're a dropout. You're not serious. The day I bought that car, I drove it off the lot with tears in my eyes. Not because I was proud of the purchase itself, but because it was proof that I had escaped survival mode. Proof that all the sacrifices meant something. That I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was building something that lasted. That car carried me to every pitch meeting, every investor dinner, every late-night brainstorming session. It carried me through sleepless weeks when I doubted myself, when my company felt like it was collapsing under the weight of bills and bad decisions. And when I signed my first $1 million contract, I drove it to my parents' house, parked it in their driveway, and stood tall, waiting for them to ask. They didn't ask. My father glanced at it once and muttered, "Nice." My mother asked if I could help Amelia with her tuition payments. Even then, I bit back my disappointment. Because to me, that car wasn't about them. It was about me, about carving out my own respect when nobody else would give it. So when I walked into the kitchen that night and my mother shrugged as if it was just a car, I felt something rupture deep inside me. Amelia needed it more than you, she said. Those words were like acid. They didn't just devalue the car, they devalued everything it represented. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of pain I had swallowed alone, dismissed in one casual sentence. I wanted to scream, "Do you even understand what it took for me to buy that car? Do you know what it's like to pawn your laptop to pay rent, then borrow it back with interest from a pawn shop just to keep coding? Do you know what it's like to eat ramen 3 meals a day, not because you're quirky or broke in a college student way, but because it's all you can afford? Do you know what it's like to carry failure in your chest every day but still wake up and fight anyway?" But of course, they didn't know. They never asked. They never cared. Amelia had been spoon-fed opportunities, and when she tripped, they softened the ground beneath her. When I tripped, they told me to get up on my own. And I did. That car was the proof. And now it was gone. The emptiness in the driveway wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. It was as though they had stripped away the one visible reminder of my independence, leaving me bare. My mother's face remained calm, defiant even, as if daring me to argue. My father's silence weighed heavier than her words. "You already have enough, Elena," she said again, her voice colder this time. "Enough." That word again. Enough what? Enough money? Enough recognition? Enough resilience to absorb every blow they threw at me? Did they not understand that I hadn't been handed anything, that everything I had was clawed from the dirt with bleeding hands? To them, my success meant I was no longer allowed to need or want. It meant I was now the resource, the fallback, the one expected to provide. But Amelia was always the one who deserved. I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself not to explode. Because deep down, I realized something important in that moment. It wasn't about the car. Not really. It was about respect. The car was simply the most visible proof of my independence. Selling it wasn't just financial betrayal. It was symbolic erasure. They had erased me. I thought back to the day I first drove that car to an investor meeting. I had parked outside a gleaming office tower, heart pounding in my chest. The receptionist looked at me like I didn't belong there, too young, too inexperienced. But when I slid my keys across the counter, something in her expression shifted. Respect. It wasn't fair, but it was real. The car changed the way people saw me. That's what my parents had taken. They hadn't just sold a vehicle. They had stripped away my proof of survival, my badge of independence. They had reduced my story of resilience into a handout for Amelia. I glanced at the staircase where Amelia's laughter drifted down. She didn't even care. She probably didn't even ask where the money came from. Why would she? Things always fell into her lap. To her, it was normal. But for me, that car was everything I had earned when the world told me I would never make it. I wanted to tell them that. I wanted to pour my heart out, to explain why it mattered so much. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, silence pressed against my chest, heavy and suffocating. And in that silence, I realized something chilling. They would never understand. They had never respected me. Not when I was 12, not when I was 20, not even now at 28 with millions on the line. Respect wasn't theirs to give. It was mine to claim. And if they couldn't see it, then maybe they didn't deserve to witness it at all. That night, as my mother's cold eyes met mine, I stopped trying to make her understand. I stopped trying to explain why the car mattered. Because the truth was simple. If they couldn't see my worth by now, they never would. And the respect I had been chasing from them all my life, I already had it. From the world, from my peers, from myself. It was never theirs to withhold. The kitchen was too quiet. The kind of quiet that vibrates in your chest, heavy and unnatural, like the silence right before a storm breaks. My father sat at the table, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug though it had long gone cold. His eyes stayed down, glued to the dark liquid as if the truth could be avoided by staring hard enough. He had always been like this, silent, compliant, the kind of man who thought peace was bought with avoidance. My mother stood near the counter, arms crossed tightly against her chest, her chin raised in defiance. She wasn't avoiding me. She was meeting my stare directly, daring me to question her decision, daring me to oppose her. She had always been like this too, unyielding, convinced her version of reality was the only one that mattered. And above us, the sound of laughter floated down the staircase. Amelia, carefree, light-hearted, completely unaware, or worse, completely unconcerned, about the war brewing downstairs. That sound made my jaw tighten until it ached. She had no idea what it felt like to carry the weight I carried. She never would. I had two choices in that moment. I could explode, let the years of resentment erupt in a storm of screaming and accusations, or I could stay silent, swallow it all like I always had. For a long second, I hovered between both. But then, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was clarity. Cold, razor-sharp clarity. I realized screaming wouldn't matter. My anger wouldn't matter. I had spent 28 years trying to make them see me, and it had never worked. Why would tonight be any different? What would hurt them wasn't anger. What would destroy them was truth. My mother finally spoke again, her voice firm, dismissive, the final nail in the coffin. Amelia needed it more. You've had your chance, Elena. Why can't you be happy for her? You already have everything. Everything. That word snapped something in me. They thought I had everything because I had built a life without their help. But what they didn't see was that I had built it despite them, not because of them. They hadn't given me everything. They had taken everything and forced me to claw my way back alone. I took a step forward, my heels clicking against the tile. My father flinched at the sound. My mother's eyes narrowed, but for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty flash across her face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. My words came out steady, sharp, deliberate. You just lost your other daughter. 6 words. They hung in the air like glass shards, suspended, slicing through the silence with precision. My mother's mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. Her eyes widened, her posture stiffened, and in that frozen moment, the defiance drained from her face. She had expected me to yell, to argue, to stomp like a child throwing a tantrum. She had not expected calm finality. My father looked up at me then, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. That was his curse. Silence. Silence when I needed defense as a child. Silence when I worked myself to the bone trying to prove I was worthy. Silence now, when everything was breaking. Amelia's laughter drifted down again, faint but sharp against the quiet. It was almost ironic, her joy blooming while our family fractured below her feet. I took a slow breath. For once, I didn't feel like the invisible one. For once, I wasn't begging to be heard. I wasn't trying to explain, to justify, to prove. I wasn't the second choice, the afterthought, the strong one who needed nothing. I was the storm. 6 words, and the balance of power shifted. My mother's hand twitched against her arm, her nails digging into her skin. She whispered, almost choking, "You don't mean that." But I did. I meant every syllable. I meant it with the weight of every forgotten birthday, every dismissed success, every time I had been told to understand why Amelia got more. I meant it with the memory of empty plates when I worked double shifts in college while Amelia was given spending money. I meant it with the sting of every rejection I endured alone, without comfort, while Amelia's smallest failures were met with gentle reassurances. I meant it because it was the truth. You just lost your other daughter. Not spoken in anger, spoken in release, spoken in liberation. The silence after those words was deafening. My mother's eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me, but fear of loss. Fear that maybe, finally, she had pushed too far. My father's hand shook as he set his coffee mug down. His lips parted, but all that came out was a broken sigh. He looked older in that moment, smaller, like he had just realized the cost of a lifetime of silence. I turned toward the door. Each step felt heavy, final. My mother called my name once, softly, desperately, but I didn't look back. Because if I did, I might see the fragments of the girl I had been, the girl who wanted their love, who begged for their approval. But that girl was gone. At the door, I paused. For a fleeting second, I thought of Amelia. Would she even notice what had happened tonight? Would she ever understand the price of being the favorite? Probably not. Maybe she didn't need to. Because tonight wasn't about her. It was about me. I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. The cool wind hit my face, sharp and cleansing, as if the world itself was acknowledging the shift that had taken place. Behind me, the house stood still, suffocating under the weight of my 6 words. Ahead of me, freedom. The night air wrapped around me like a cloak as I stepped outside, the door shutting softly behind me. It was strange, after all that had just been said. I expected to feel heavy, broken, maybe even guilty. But instead, what I felt was light. Almost too light, as if I had just set down a weight I'd been carrying for years without realizing how crushing it had become. For so long, family had been the tether around my ankle, something that kept me tied down no matter how far I ran or how high I climbed. Tonight, for the first time, I had cut the rope. The driveway stretched out in front of me, emptier than it should have been. My car should have been there, gleaming under the porch light, a symbol of the nights I spent awake in foreign cities, negotiating with men twice my age, proving I could outthink, outwork, outlast anyone in the room. But the space was bare, and that emptiness burned. They hadn't just sold a car. They had sold my years. They had sold my struggle. They had sold the proof that I had clawed my way into a world they couldn't even begin to understand. And they had done it without hesitation. I stood at the edge of the driveway and pulled out my phone. For a second, I considered calling someone, anyone, just to ground myself. But then I remembered the look on my mother's face when my 6 words hit her like a blade. The way her confidence cracked, the way her armor slipped. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. That moment had been validation enough. The Uber arrived, headlights sweeping across the quiet street. I slid into the back seat, the driver giving me a polite nod before pulling away. As the house shrank behind me, I felt no urge to turn back. For the rest of the ride, I stared out the window, my reflection staring back at me from the glass. I thought of all the times I had questioned myself because of them. All the nights I lay awake wondering if I was selfish for wanting recognition, for craving the same support they handed to Amelia so freely. But as the city lights blurred past, a realization rooted itself deep inside me. Family isn't blood. Family is choice. Blood had failed me a long time ago. Blood had told me my pain was drama, my dreams were too much, my victories were not enough. Blood had sold my car and called it sacrifice. But choice? Choice was different. Choice was the friends who celebrated every deal I closed with champagne over FaceTime. Choice was the mentors who believed in me when my parents didn't. Choice was the employees who trusted me to lead them, who followed me not because they had to, but because they believed I would never fail them. That was family. When I reached my apartment, the city greeted me like an old ally. The skyline stretched wide and glittering, unapologetic in its brightness. It didn't ask me to shrink, to dim, to make space for someone else. It let me shine as much as I wanted. I dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my heels, and let out a laugh. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even mocking. It was relief, sharp and real. I had closed a $12 million deal. I had stood my ground. And tonight, I had finally set myself free. But freedom, I realized, doesn't mean absence. It means redefinition. 4 days afterward, I didn't hear from my parents. No calls, no texts. Silence. The kind of silence that once would have gnawed at me, filling me with panic and regret. But now, it was different. Now, it felt like space I had needed for years. When Amelia finally called, her voice was casual, almost airy. "Mom said you were dramatic again. What did you say to her?" I smiled into the receiver, not with anger but with clarity. Ask her, I said simply, before hanging up, because it wasn't my job anymore to explain myself. It wasn't my job to carry their guilt, to translate my worth into a language they could understand. I owed them nothing. Instead, I poured myself into my wake, into the people who had chosen to stand beside me. My company expanded. My circle grew tighter, stronger. I surrounded myself with voices that lifted me, not voices that dismissed me. And slowly, the definition of family changed. Family became the late-night brainstorming sessions with my team that turned into laughter over pizza boxes. Family became the friend who showed up with soup when I was sick, unasked. Family became the silence of my apartment at night, peaceful, not suffocating, because I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I was surrounded by choice. Months later, I stood at another airport gate, ready to board another flight to Europe. My phone buzzed with an email, another multi-million-dollar deal waiting on the other side. My reflection in the glass was steadier now, stronger. I thought about those 6 words again. You just lost your other daughter. Maybe one day they'd realize I hadn't said them out of cruelty. I had said them out of truth. Because love without respect isn't love at all. Because family without choice isn't family. It's captivity. I boarded the plane with no hesitation. The world was wide, and I was no longer tethered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Elena, the afterthought, the second best. I was Elena, the architect of her own family, her own destiny. And that, I realized as the plane lifted into the sky, was worth more than any car, any deal, any blood tie.